Andrew, thanks again for giving us some of your time to talk about church planner related issues. And the one that you've got us thinking about today is fear. I'm not really sure that's the first thing that springs to mind when I think of church planners. They all strike me as that fearless bunch who run out there and say, virgin territory, let's plan a church, what may. But you think fear is something that church planners actually are shaped by?
Oh, I think it's a big issue that we need to deal with. We want to have men and women who are ready to go out and be bold and kind of go for it, absolutely, and virgin territory is fantastic for sure. But nonetheless, in the midst of that, there's our humanity and our weakness that, like all people in ministry, in all contexts of life, but I think planting's more prone to fear than any other style of ministry because in any other pastoral setting, you can just turn the wheels with a work, and it's been going for some decades, and you can just keep rolling on, and if it doesn't work, you'll still have a living and so on. But with a church plant, when you start from scratch, if you don't see things move forward, then you're out the back door. Your family's, we've got to go find another job, we've got to relocate, all that kind of stuff. So that feeds into the insecurities in planting that are there perhaps more than any other ministry. And so, it's a big issue. It impacts the way we relate to building a core team, a launch team. It impacts the way we lead people. It impacts the way we relate to new people who come to church. It impacts the way we preach. All of those things can be fueled and fed by actually a fear of failure, where I may not get a self-sustaining ministry going. And so I think it's a very big issue.
Do you think that that sort of fear that you're talking about, particularly as it relates to building core teams and maybe let's say that first 12 months where you're really running as hard as you can, do you think that turns people into pragmatists, less spiritual, more what will work?
Yeah, and I think it leads us to make short-term decisions without regard to the long-term, so that I just need things done. And here's a person who's breathing, who's still warm, who's got blood pumping. That's all I need. I don't want to look too closely to see whether they've got problems, whether they've left their church because they're. I just need someone to do this work.
They've offered to do the children's ministry, and we really need somebody to step in.
Or not. Someone to do it. I was in a context once where a man arrived new to a church plant, and the next week he was asked to actually be the welcomer at the door. That was the last time he ever came to church. But, you can end up wanting to introduce people into ministries too quickly. It's the Apostle Paul's concerned about don't lay hands too quickly, and it's rife in church planning, that tendency and that temptation to do that. Of course, you can be too cautious, and all of that needs to be balanced off. But I think fear drives that, and we need to be. I want to keep in my own life and with others keep reminding myself that the sovereignty of God, the providential power of God, the gospel work. The gospel is powerful. He will build his church. And a big dose of gospel love, that my concern isn't for me and my ministry, my concern is for the cause of Christ in the lives of people. So what matters is their growth in maturity and not how they serve my interests. So I'm more able to say to the person who comes to me from another church, although you'd be a great help here, you need to go back. Because spiritually, for your life, you need to deal with those issues, although it would be a great help for us. And so
you're actually talking about, now I don't want to split hairs with sovereignty here, but it's not just the grand sovereignty of God's purpose, but you're also talking about a more particular sovereignty that if God is going to bless this work, he will bless this work, this particular work. Or if God is called you and brought you into being part of the team here, that he is also going to be able to keep you where he takes you. Is that a fair balance?
Well, it's all certainly true. If God has put me somewhere, he can keep me there, but he puts me everywhere.
Yeah.
So wherever he puts me, he can choose to keep me or move me on quickly. So in the sovereignty of God, there's no guarantee that this particular church plant that I've started will be blessed of God in terms of it becoming a self-sustaining, giving work. It might be that I made a bad decision in trying to plant in this particular place at this time, and but even if that's the case, I trust the sovereignty of God, that I look to Him, His glory, His purposes, the love of others, and I don't have my whole self caught up with this particular venture having to be the thing that succeeds. It's the gospel and the triumph of the gospel broadly that I do need to keep in mind.
We've talked a bit about fear in how it relates to the success of the ministry, but there's also, I guess, fear in how we relate to other people. The people that we're serving, maybe the people that are in the congregation with us.
Yeah, totally. And church planting arouses lots of fears in them, which will cause them to relate to me, the planter, in often very hostile ways. And we've certainly had some of that in our context, partly because of me and the way I've done things. But
surely not.
Absolutely so. And managing that as a planter is a huge challenge. You'll have conflict in your launch team because you'll choose people who shouldn't be there as quickly and you need to sometimes anyway. You've got to stretch, and so there'll be tensions amongst people and how you manage that and so on as a leader. Largely, I think it's helped by a deep and profound grasp of the providential sovereignty of God, the grace that we have in Him that establishes me before Him, that establishes us together so that love covers a multitude of sin. All of that becomes actually paramount in the way we operate together. And I see it more and more. I'm astonished at how the New Testament's so relevant. It just... we see you move together in a very intense context, planning a church, and the potential for misunderstandings and tension and friction and hurt is massive. And so that I, as the planter, lead not just the programs of church and the systems of church, but that I lead the tone and culture of a grace community. Is totally paramount. It's massively important.
I actually love the way that you talk about this. You're not just talking about fears that people will accuse you unreasonably, but you're also dealing with fears where you actually are, part of the problem, and you're part of the problem, but God is sovereign with that.
Yeah. And the culture we're wanting to create is a community of forgiven sinners. And of course, as a leader, I'll act in ways that are insensitive, thoughtless, hurtful, deliberately so sometimes. I remember one meeting where there was a group that I'd been working with some 18 months in the early stage of a church plant where they were resistant to church being outward focused, and it kept showing up in passive aggressive forms all the way through our meetings. And at the end of one meeting, I just let loose and expressed my anger and disappointment and frustration.
Forthrightly.
Yeah. And do you know what? The man's anger doesn't achieve God's purposes. And so I had to come back and apologise to various men in that context and resolve again that as the leader, I'm effectively like a transformer. I think this has been a concept I've run with for a long time, where I'm the one that receives in the alternating current, and my job as a leader is to absorb that and turn it into direct current, to smooth out, and it heats me up. I absorb a lot of people's angst and hurt because I don't want to keep fueling it further and passing it on more, and I want to be the one that calms and brings grace and so on. So I heat up in all of that, and I've got to learn to, as a leader, deal with that heat. And there's various strategies and things that you can do over the years to make sure that works better, but that's our task.
Mate, thanks very much for working us through that. I mean, I think that's actually, I don't think that's just church planners who would be benefiting from hearing that advice. I think that's brilliant. Look, if you are listening and you think to yourself, gosh, I've got one for Andrew, send us an email. The address is appearing on the screen now, and Andrew will do his best to answer it. And maybe we'll find out how well his patience lasted him in the next few weeks before we talk again. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.